And here's a claim that also takes some, is hard to explain, but I think is a major part of the book. This is, and I didn't talk about it. I started working with someone studying the fair tax with the idea that we would write a book about it, and we never decided. We had basically ended up deciding not to do it. Someone else came out with a similar book, and my to-be co-author that never materialized used to call this the big lie. Okay? And it's a sort of you can have your cake and eat it too type of an argument. And this is the way it goes. The idea is that in our current system, as you produce goods, there's taxes embedded in the cost of those goods. So for example, if I'm producing a car, I have to pay workers. And those workers, when I pay them $1, 30 cents of it gets withheld from their paycheck. It goes to the government. They only get 70 cents. Okay? So that 30 cents is part of the cost of the car because they're only going to have 70 cents. If I want to pay them 70 cents, I got to actually cut a check for $1. Pay 30 cents to the government, 70 cents to them. And then when I buy from a supplier, they also have employees. And so most of the cost has this embedded tax in it that's in the wage cost. And so that's the concept. What they say is, okay, so when we get rid of all that embedded tax, prices will drop because that tax won't be there. Okay, so now the car that costs $10,000 is going to cost $7,000. So when you go and put the fair tax on it, it comes back up to the same price it was. So the claim is you get to keep your whole paycheck and prices will be the same, including the fair tax that they were before. So it's like you don't have to pay any tax. I mean, that's why people like the fair tax. It's free money, right? Everything is, it's like there's no cost to it. And there is a cost to paying taxes. It costs money to pay taxes. And this is really the crux of why that's wrong. Okay? If you assume that what they say is true, and you're somebody that works for GM, the car manufacturer, right now I'm paid $1 in wage, and I have to pay 30 cents to the government, I get 70 cents. If you assume that the embedded taxes are taken out of the cost of the car, they're not going to pay me $1. They're going to pay me what was my take-home pay. So now I get a check for 70 cents instead of $1. Okay? So I'm really having to pay that same income tax, that 30 cents, afterwards as I did before. So even if the price is the same, it still costs you the same as a worker. If you assume that, which I think would be the case, labor unions are not going to say, oh, okay, now that my members don't have to pay tax, you can pay me less. You're going to keep the same wage rates. So you're going to still have to pay me $1, even though I don't have to pay tax on it. And so the embedded taxes will still be there. What was the embedded taxes will still be there. And even Neil Bortz, I think, sort of edges on this a little bit. He goes through this analysis of, you'll have to make a decision about whether to reduce what you pay your employees now that they don't have to pay income tax. But the real gist of it is that's not a tax on the employer, that's a tax on the employee. So I think that's one that a lot of people really, you go through that and you're just like, wow, we can fund the government, it doesn't cost us anything, that sounds great. But it really just is not realistic. It's kind of like, if something sounds too good to be true, yeah.
Now, the fair tax only addresses federal taxes.
Right.
Right. So there's the state and local taxes that fund state and local activities. How do the fair tax people address state and local?
Right, and the thing is, right now the states piggyback on the federal income tax. Well, they do tell you. They say now that states won't have the federal income tax, you're not going to have a state going through the whole compliance issue of everyone computing their income. Now they piggyback off the federal. So they even really go into this, say that what's likely to happen, I think what would be forced to happen, is the states would have to piggyback on this and have additional, so even the rate would be even higher because it would include a state sales tax that would replace the state income tax as well as this. And so then you have even more of an issue. And there's another issue with, it's like the three-legged stool. There's some benefit to having a variety of different types of taxes because some do better in different types of economies and it causes less up and down in the government, which we've seen quite a lot of. If you have all sales tax in a recession, it really is going to hurt the government worse than we're hurt right now. So I think that's another issue as well. But the idea is basically to replace the state income tax with the state sales tax. It would be forced on the states because they're not going to go through a system of having everyone compute their income just for state tax purposes.
So that state sales tax would be additive to the 23%.
Right.
Well, that's up to the state.
It is up to the state, but that's really gonna be their only choice, because otherwise they're gonna have to administer at what's replacing the federal income tax.
Dependent on the W-2.
Yeah. Yeah, right, they don't have W-2 income to be.
Does fair tax address the issue of tax avoidance?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about that
Is that
between
like the black market?
the black market, but then also the what is called the tax gap, which is, you know, the difference between how much tax should be remitted if everybody paid exactly what they should versus what's actually remitted. And there's really two pieces to it. There's the black market is one, but then also under-reporting income. And the way they address it is to say that won't be a problem with the fair tax, and I think that's wrong. So.
A question on the bill,
Mhm.
House Bill 25. I read it a couple of years ago when it started coming up.
Uh-huh.
And I read some pieces in there about taxing the mortgage interest rate over a fair amount. Have you
I'm not familiar with that.
There was some wording in there and I didn't understand it then, and I was still trying to find some information on it.
Well, send it to me, and I'll take a look at it and see if I can figure out what it
Okay,
is.
yeah, I got a copy of it.
I'm not familiar with it. I do know that like mortgage services would be taxed, but
Right.
not the finance. Like your origination fee probably would be taxed, and the cost of new homes would be taxed, but not the cost of old homes. And I know, you know, real estate, and this was back before there was such a big drop, but the home construction industry, they did not like this bill.
Well, there's two things that were excluded, and that was taxes on securities.
Uh-huh.
Those are not considered taxable, as
Mhm.
well as purchases for education. Those are the only two things.
Exclusions, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds, yeah, I know, because investment, they're really trying to, you know, spur people to do more investing.
Investment.
The thing that all of a sudden dawned on me when you were talking about this is that what we have found with the present system that we've got, that anything that is a tax deduction is a driving force for our economy. So that everybody looks to what they can do, whether giving money to charity or whatever, so they don't have to pay any tax on it. So if we now have a system that is driving, not consuming new products, what we would all of a sudden do to America, which is driven by consumption of new products, is kill it. We would have nobody buying a new product.
And especially now, that's more of an issue than it was in the past. As a tax incentive consultant, you'd think I'd have brought that out, but I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Well, this is like the third, few of the counties that I've gone to have had people come in and speak. Of course, they were all for the fair tax, they were businessmen from the town. Toledo just recently, Lamar, I can't remember yet. But you see, as I said, they don't bring, see, the speakers who come in don't really go in detail. And the first thing they try to do is make the IRS, or whatever it is, the monster.
Yeah.
The big monster. We're gonna do away with this monster. And we'll do it this way, you know, as you said, they point out.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things that they point out, or they don't point out, is that they would expect vendors and companies to pay that 23 to 30%. And if you've been watching the several Democrats and a couple Republican candidates for governor, they say that this state alone is the worst state in collecting. Even Alabama does a better job of collecting from these businesses.
Yeah.
That's a shame, because I.
And actually,
really
I've done a
feel
lot of
bad.
work with sales tax, and I'll tell you, Alabama is usually quoted as they do really well, but Alabama is a difficult state to comply with because every single jurisdiction has a different rules. I mean, it's not a statewide rule, so Alabama is a mess in its own
See,
way.
that's like our board of election
Yeah.
in this state. But anyway, but we do know one thing, whether we like it or not, the turnaround doesn't do a bad job of collecting our taxes. And they let you know if you didn't do it,
Yeah.
they'll call you down.
There's certainly some room for simplifying our tax
If
code.
you
though.
look into it, and you all know this, that the bars and coffee shops and hairdressers, a lot of these get closed up because when you walk up there that morning, there's a sign on the door, failure to pay your Georgia state
Yeah.
taxes. And they don't put this fault in that thing, they don't explain, there's probably 10% of the businesses are not gonna be in business next year, and they're not in the business because they didn't pay that yearly tax. So they're gonna have to have an agency really to police these businesses to
Right.
pay the taxes, which is gonna be a lot more, and it will bring it up to 30%.
I think the fair tax would be, if you give it, one thing I'd give it credit for, it is simpler than our current system, but it's not as simple as they would have it out to be. There would certainly be a fair tax revenue service, or whatever it is, because you would have to deal with the compliance of the vendors. But, you know, there's a trade-off between simplicity and effectiveness, and it's simple, but it's not all that effective, so.
The next thing is, like I'd like to point out, and she passed away, my mother-in-law, which was 93. She didn't have to file her income tax except when she got that $250 stimulus package, since she was 65 years old. And all of a sudden, these people, they would, I don't know if they come under poor or not substantial,
Yeah.
they would have to file some sort of a thing with the Republic.
To get their prebate, exactly, that's
prebate.
true, right.
They didn't have to go to another
Right.
CPA and pay extra
To get the
money,
prebate, that's
'cause
true,
they're not gonna
that's
know
true.
how to do it.
And really, our system is not that complicated for a wage earner, because, you know, that's fairly, you get TurboTax, and it's pretty straightforward. But it's pretty complicated for, you know, large businesses and things, so they're, I think our system's not the best. I don't wanna say I'm here defending everything about our system. There's room for improvement. I don't think this is the way to do it, though. And I think there's just sort of this, this idea out there that seems to have resonance with people that anything government does is bad and wrong and is never done well. But, you know, I don't think FedEx can get my letter for 44 cents to California, you know, and door to door. So, I mean, there are a lot of things the government does that they do well. Huh? Neither can government. Most of my letters get where they're supposed to go.
The difference is FedEx can't go to the people and say, hey, I'm gonna tax you for some more money to pay for the
Yeah, well,
US Postal Service.
The Postal Service, the military, the highway system, there are a lot of things the government does, and education that the government does that I think are done fairly well, yeah?